Job has always been a very hard book for me to read. It seems very long-winded through most of it. I'll be reading along, lose track of what the point is. Say, what did he just say? And I'll go back to the beginning of the chapter and start over again. Now, most people think of Job as pain and suffering. And it's true. Pain and suffering is the basis of the entire book. But there's many lessons that can be learned in it. There's a lot of parts in Job. Just like suffering is an ingredient like you would have in a cake. You wouldn't eat the flour or the eggs or the shortening raw, but you put them together and bake it and you have a cake. And when you think of cake, you think of like celebrations and birthdays, the beginning of a good meal. The conversations that are carried on in the book of Job are between Job and his 4 friends. Now they've come together and they talk about some points that are still talked about today. When something goes wrong in our lives, such as a car crash that kills a young person, or sickness or death in the family, a person loses his job, people will ask, why did this happen? Why me? And many times, these people, if they don't have strong faith, they'll wonder, why do I deserve this? Why is God so unjust? Why has God abandoned me? And a lot of times this happens that they abandon God or just think that God is unjust and don't believe in him anymore. The main lesson I think that has come to me in Job is that we always need to have faith in God. God's wisdom is far beyond the mental capacities of man. And we always have to have faith that what he is doing is going to come back to us for good, or come back to him for good as well. So it's okay to ask these questions, because bad things do happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And we sometimes question God, why does it happen that way? And we don't always know, but the book of Job doesn't necessarily answer these questions directly. But at the end of it, God turns man's thinking around to a different perspective about life, to look at things differently. I base this message on a book by Philip Yancey, The Bible That Jesus Read. And one of his chapters was on Job, and he covers a lot of the problems that I've had with Job, and he clarifies some of the meanings for me. Starting in chapter 1 and 2, think of it as a murder mystery or a play that the critics and the media have been invited before the show starts and brought in on a behind-the-scenes look at what's going on up in heaven. These are things that the players won't know while they're discussing their parts, but the audience understands it. There's a cosmic wager that's going on between God and Satan. To put it in man's terms, imagine God's having a monthly staff meeting, and all his angels have assembled, and he sees in the back of the room Satan is standing there, and he says, Satan, what you been up to lately? Satan responds, oh, I've been going to and fro and up and down on the earth. God says, hey, have you run across my man Job? Very upstanding, righteous man, doesn't follow evil. He's a great guy. Satan scoffs. The only reason Job obeys you and worships you is because of all the rewards that you give him. If it wasn't for these, he'd turn his back on you and reject you. Now this is a direct assault on God's character. Because what Satan's saying is that man is too stupid to realize that the God that created the universe and runs it deserves more from mankind than just rewards. And if we didn't have the rewards, we'd abandon them. So God accepts this challenge because he knows he has a ringer in Job. And he knows that there's many men that will worship him just for no other reason than he is who he is. So he allows Satan to remove all of Job's possessions and his blessings, short of physical harm. So 4 catastrophes happened to Job in rapid succession. His oxen and his donkeys are out in the field working, and a band of bandits come out and kill them all. Fire from heaven comes down and kills all of his sheep. Chaldeans raid and steal all of his camels. But the worst tragedy of all is that his 10 children are celebrating in the eldest son's house when a strong wind comes up, knocks the house over, and kills everybody that is inside the house. What's Job's response to this? The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The next month, God's having his monthly staff meeting. And he sees Satan in the back of the room, and he goes, Satan, what you been up to? Satan responds, I'm just going to and fro, wandering up and down on the earth. And God says, wait, what about my man Job? Didn't I tell you? He's blameless, upright. Again, Satan, he scoffs. He goes, man doesn't really care about his possessions and other people getting hurt and things. You have to have, as he puts it, skin for skin. The pain has to be personal, has to be part of him. He has to experience that pain. So God agrees, and he allows Satan to proceed in this cosmic experiment. And he says, you can do anything you want to Job short of death. So Satan goes back down to earth and covers Job from head to foot with boils and sores all over his skin. Job's wife abandons God immediately. Her advice to Job is to curse God and die. Job tells her, no, that's just foolishness. If man is going to accept rewards, he also has to accept adversity. Now this is the second test of man. What was the first test? There's a quickie quiz today. Adam and Eve. We know how that turned out. But they're not really a good comparison because they lived in the Garden of Eden, and it's synonymous with utopia. They only had one thing they had to do, and that was they could eat any fruit of the garden except one. Now, Job's test is different because he has Satan, who has a free will, a free hand, and anything he wants to do short of death to Job. And all Job has to do is have faith in God. Now, this isn't an apples to apples comparison, no pun intended. It's a best case versus worst case scenario. So when you get through chapters 1 and 2, they set the scene for the chapters 3 through 37. Job's 4 friends travel from out of town, probably some great distance, to be with Job, to sit with him, to comfort him, to see what they can do for him, cheer him up. But I thought it was interesting that we're not told about any local people that have tried to help Job. I suspect that they consider him unclean, leprous. He has skin sores on him. So he's looked down upon. So his friends have come a long way out of town, and they sit in silence with Job for 7 days without speaking. They're just there to support him. So at the ends of these 7 days, Job speaks finally. And he says he regrets the day that he was born. Why was there a celebration that a boy was born to this family? Why does he even exist if it was going to turn out the way it has? Why did God bring him into life just to torture him now? Wouldn't it have been better if he were just still born and buried right then? Well, for the next 34 chapters, Job's friends explain a false dogmatic doctrine about how God's justice system works, how God rewards and punishes people. All their arguments are a little bit different from the 3 of his friends are speaking at first. And all their arguments are a little different, but they all boil down to the same concept, that if you are obedient to God and are righteous, He'll reward you. But if you are sinful and follow evil, then you're going to be punished. So each man speaks in his turn in succession, and Job usually responds to it, explaining why they're wrong and that it isn't part of his situation. And this happens a lot to us today. If you're in the hospital, somebody comes and visits you, you have things going bad in your life, people always have advice for you. And it's generally with half the information that they have. And that's what Job's friends are. They don't know what Job's life is. They're from out of town. But they still tell him, oh, well, this is wrong because this happened because this is what you did wrong. And we hear that as well today, many times. But there's a conflict going on with Job. In his mind, he knows the type of man he is. He knows the good that he does, his righteousness. But he also thinks he understands God's justice. And he's confused. Because if he rejects God because he thinks he's being unjust, it would have a great void in his life without God. Because he knows he has a deep faith in a loving God. But if he admits his condition and all of this is happening because he deserves it, it would compromise his integrity. He knows he hasn't done anything in his life. Even though he's a sinner, he doesn't feel he deserves this level of punishment. So Job's second response is different from his first. His first time, he's asked, why was I even born? But this time, his request is that he wishes he were dead. He begs God to turn his wrath away from him, to leave him alone, forgive him of his sins. He starts to feel God as his enemy, not as the loving, holy God that he's known all his life, but he feels he's his adversary. He wonders, why does God pursue me in everything I do? I think another reason that Job wants to die is because he's afraid that in his pain and anguish that he may just blaspheme God. Or even worse, reject him altogether. Job's friends, they think now that Job is bordering on blasphemy. That he needs to be careful with what he's talking about. But Job feels that he has a valid reason for asking these questions. Now, I think when I read some of this that his friends are forgetting an important point. Job is in agonizing pain. He's hurt so bad that dragging broken shards of pottery across his skin gives him relief. They didn't teach you anything about that, did they, Brian? No. I shouldn't say things like that, then I lose my place. So, yeah, I really did lose my place.
No.
So, by the third time, the third round of speeches, his friends have pretty much used up all their arguments. And they don't really want to continue in this debate any longer because they think Job is being blasphemous and they don't want to get on the wrong side of God. So this time, the third time Job responds to any of this, is now his request is that he has a lawyer, a mediator to act between him and God to explain Job's position to God because he doesn't think God will listen to him. Now this is a prophetic idea of Jesus who acts as our mediator today. This is so that we can go boldly before the throne and converse with God directly. When Jesus Messiah died on the cross, the curtain that separated the Holy of Holies was ripped from the top to the bottom. And that symbolized our access to God through Jesus. Job feels that God isn't going to listen to him. So he requires a mediator, someone to tell his side of the story. Now at this point, there's the fourth friend. He's been standing quietly off on the side out of respect for his elders, the other three guys, and let them get their points out. And their points, they're just about out of them. So the fourth guy, he takes exception to Job's last request that he has a one-on-one with God. And he speaks up, he says, God doesn't give one-on-ones. He's the creator of the universe. Why would he bother with one individual who's complaining about what's happening to him in life? If God deems that you deserve punishment, then man up to it and accept the consequences. But meanwhile, off in the west, there's a dark cloud starting to form. And as the fourth friend is explaining to Job how God does things and how he runs the universe, This cloud is coming closer. There's lightning flashing out of it. There's thunder rolling. And as it draws up to the guys, God's voice comes out of the cloud. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Gird your loins. Stand like a man. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them. So far through, like the first 37 chapters, most of the book of Job, God is the one who has been on trial. Job wants to know, why are you doing this to me? You deserve to tell me something. Why? Explain it yourself to me. And his friends, they're telling God how to run the universe. If you don't do things the way God wants you to, you're going to be punished. If you're good and righteous, then you're going to be rewarded. So God's now going to reverse those roles. He's going to put man in the witness box. He's going to be the judge. He's the one that's asking the questions, and men are going to be the one that are going to answer. God's not going to answer the questions anymore. So God doesn't directly answer the questions that are raised in Job. Why me? Why does this happen to people? Instead, he proceeds to describe the beauty of the universe. He asks questions that only he knows the answer to. Such as, who was there when I snapped the line to set the cornerstone of the universe? Who knows where I laid the foundations of the universe? Now that's an extremely powerful thought to me. Imagine infinity. We can't. Men's mental capacity cannot fathom infinity. Yet God's wisdom knows where the foundation is, the limits of infinity. That gives me goosebumps when I think about that. So when God's finished telling people how they should be thinking about the universe, Job realizes his misunderstanding of God and repents, saying, surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. With this repentance, the cosmic wager has been completed. Job did not reject God. No matter through all of the trials and suffering he went, he stayed faithful to God. Now, God forgives Job for all his actions and his speeches during this time. And he tells his buddies that they should have Job repent for him and offer sacrifices. But it's another, let me add that it's in our nature to want to understand why God does things to us when we're hurt. And God will accept that. But his buddies, on the other hand, they are the ones that were in the wrong. God turns his attention over to his buddies, and he says, what you guys are saying about me is completely wrong. Who are you to limit me? Who are you to tell me how to run the universe? Are you guys going to give me counsel? And sometimes we do those things as well. We pass judgment on people, write creeds, about man-made rules of how we're supposed to behave and what God expects of us. Saying that other people aren't fit, other congregations aren't fit to be Christians if they don't follow their man-made rules. Our understanding and our knowledge is minuscule to God's wisdom. We can't limit God to our man-made ideas. We can't tell God what he should and shouldn't do. God can run the entire universe. It runs like a well-tuned machine. And yet he knows where the smallest sparrow falls and where and when a fawn is born in the woods. So we must always have faith in God, because what he has in store for us may not be what we think we deserve. But like Job told his wife, you need to take the good and the bad. There's two lessons that I've touched on today in the book of Job. First is that God may punish us in our lives. But on the other hand, he may give us blessings, and we know he does. What good father does not discipline his child? It shows that he loves that child. If you don't discipline your children, they will grow up without understanding and knowing right from wrong. So we have to bring them up in their lives so that they become good people and good citizens. But we've got to remember that bad things do happen in life because there's sin in the world. But the book of Job doesn't answer these questions directly, but God gave us a different viewpoint to look at. Not directly on this pain and suffering, but what does God do for us? Consider the second lesson that I touched on earlier. Questioning God about why things have gone bad in our lives. It's okay to question God, why me? Why did I deserve this? Picture Jesus hanging on the cross after he's been beaten, whipped, and mocked. Before he died, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Though dying and feeling abandoned by his Father, he continued on with, into your hands I commit my soul. Jesus never lost his faith in God. And this teaches us that when we need faith the most, it's precisely at the time it seems most impossible. God may never have been closer to his Son than right then when he was on the cross. So when bad things happen to us, we must always keep faith in God.